Welcome to Recovery Soapbox, brought to you by Brighton Recovery Center. I'm Jonathan Saul, and I'm very excited to introduce today's guest. Our guest is known internationally as an actor, producer, director, podcaster, and recovering sex and love addict. And after the release of her first book, Secret Life of a Hollywood Sex and Love Addict, she's also a writer. Her podcast is called Secret Life Podcast and can be streamed from any of the major podcast hosting apps. Brianne Davis began her acting career in high school, landing a role on Dawson's Creek. After that, she went on to appear in dozens of films and television series such as Lucifer, Casual, True Blood, the History Channel series Six, and the film Jarhead. In her recent history, Brianne went through the tumultuous process of admitting that she is a sex and love addict. Since then, and many incredibly descriptive stories later, she embraced her recovery and emerged from the haze of getting sober and having written a book about it. Secret Life of a Hollywood Sex and Love Addict is a heart-wrenching, yet inspiring and sometimes hilarious story of Brianne's journey through addiction and into recovery. Brianne is intent on raising awareness about sex and love addiction, which is the main reason she's here with us today. Well, Brianne, we couldn't be more excited to have you. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Great. Well, so you run a podcast. We're going to get to your book in a minute here, but you run a podcast, the Secret Life Podcast.
Yes.
And you are often, or probably more used to at this point, being the interviewer.
I am. I love the podcast. I actually never wanted to do a podcast, never wanted to write a book. I was happy just being an actress. But what happened after I came out as a sex and love addict and wrote an article for HuffPost, that last bit of stigma and shame that I didn't realize I was carrying around for the last 12 years, lifted. And I had this moment after the pandemic hit. I woke up at 3:00 in the morning and I thought, oh my God, Secret Life Podcast, give other people a chance to let go of their secret from the past or the present. And it's been the best thing I've ever done, honestly. I'm so proud of the podcast.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So here you are sitting in the interviewee spot. Is
Yes.
it weird or are you ready?
I'm ready. I've been acting for so long. I'm used to being interviewed too.
Right.
So I'm open. I love it. I'm so excited to be here, honestly.
Awesome. Great. Well, let's dive in.
Okay.
So you wrote this book.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to show everybody, even though we're going to show them again in the other sections of this, but Secret Life and of a Hollywood Sex and Love Addict.
The longest title known to man.
It is long, and it looks like in the title that things were added, later or something, and it's just kind of like jotted down. You got the Hollywood sign in there. What's it like writing a book?
Horrible.
Really?
No, actually, I don't take credit for the book, to be honest. When I read the book, when I did the audio book, it didn't feel like I wrote it. I had a moment when I was reading it out loud, practicing, and I said, oh, it's good, to my husband. And he was like, yeah, you wrote it. And I said, honestly, I didn't write it. I feel like my God or my higher power, my universe wrote it, because I never wanted to write a book. I was never going to come out as a sex and love addict. I was being of service in my community the last decade. But what happened when I hit a decade, this feeling of like younger people were coming in the program, more people are suffering, they're not connecting. Social media is amplifying the disconnection.
Right.
The fear of intimacy, the fear of abandonment, all those things underneath addiction. And I just was like, I have to be of service bigger. And what happened is my husband came up to me and he said, hey, there's this writing class. And I'm like, I'm dyslexic, I have ADHD. I'm not gonna write, what are you talking about? He's like, no, there's this 90-day writing class and I think you should take it. And I was like, I'm shooting Lucifer right now. What are you I'm an actor. I just want the words. I don't want to create the words. And he, just gently kept nudging me. And by the 6th time I said, fine, leave me alone, I'll write it. I'll go to the class. And I went and I wrote the book in 45 days.
I know, I read that. And that was one of my questions here is, so more of a channeling, if you will, through a higher power, right? Mm-hmm. And in your universe or whatever you believe in, right? And there's an element of, have you heard the concept of flow?
Yes.
Right, so when I read that, I was like, that was probably flow.
It was.
For her. So is that an experience that you just wrote everything down and the whole thing's a blur and it just came out as this like story?
Pretty much. I mean, I did the exercises in the class, and it just flew out of me. It was bigger than me.
Yeah.
God is, our higher power is just using me as a channel. That's how I feel about it. So when I speak about it, when people talk about the book, it's not mine anymore. It never was mine. So I kind of like it, where it's everybody else's, not mine.
That's amazing. So this is a kind of a meaning of life thing for you.
Yeah.
What is my legacy? What is my meaning of life? And
that's where I had that moment. I had that moment because as an actor, we're so selfish. We're self-involved. It's all about career. And I've been doing it for 20 years and I make a living at it. I'm a working actor. I'm not an A-list celebrity by any means, but I make a living at it, but you still have to be very selfish and self-seeking.
Yeah.
And the problem is with my addiction, my therapist told me I picked the worst addiction, but the worst career for my addiction, which is true. And, when I wrote it, it was to be of service and to help other people. And it became oh, this is why I'm on this planet.
Right.
All these people all over the world are reaching out to me now, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, and I'm seeing them in the meetings, and I'm seeing people get help. I mean, the other day I had someone write me, and I'm gonna cry, but this woman said, I just read your book in 10 hours. My therapist recommended it to me. And I was like,
wow.
A therapist, that, it's that is everything to me, because I just wanna help. If I can help one person, then it was worth it.
Yeah.
It was completely worth it.
That's great. A sense of purpose.
Yeah.
It will drive anybody to do something, right? That's
yeah.
amazing. Okay, well, before we go any further,
okay.
I feel like we need to define some things as you would define them.
Okay.
Right? So can you define, this is probably a big question, but what is a sex and love addict?
Oh, this is my favorite question.
Okay.
So this is how I easily define it. So let's look at the sex addiction side. So sex addiction is when you're addicted to a sexual act, not actually the person.
Okay.
And it's usually about power and control. So it has nothing to do with the person. So you're addicted to porn. You're addicted to masturbation, cheating, which I was, having multiple relationships that kind of overlap, which I would do. DMing, swiping left, right, looking for that one night stand, that hit. Then you go to the love addict side, and that is going back to unavailable people, having relationship after relationship after relationship, flirting, intriguing. And if you don't know what intriguing is, it's a bump up from flirting. It's like telling someone you're available or giving them your number, just making yourself seem available. And and on the other side of it, there's sexual anorexia, where you shut down sexually. So a lot of people, have a bad relationship and then they're like, oh, I'm not going to be with anybody. I'm not going to date. And they'll go years and years and years with sexual anorexia. And what happens is with sex and love addicts, we swing usually between. So we use sex for power and manipulation and control, but then we become obsessed with an unavailable person because we are unavailable. But it's all really, fear of intimacy, fear of abandonment, fear of not being loved, fear of worthiness sits under all those activities.
Okay.
That's the easiest way I define it.
That's great. Well, you answered a few of my questions in one answer,
Good.
So that's amazing. So how does codependency factor into sex and love addiction?
I think codependency overlaps a lot, because what happens if you're after an unavailable person and you want them to love you, you become codependent. You become guided by their moods. What they say affect your reality. On the sex addiction side, not so much, but they overlap. So, if someone I care about is in a bad mood and then I take on that bad mood or I try to fix them, you can't fix anybody in this world.
Right.
And that's the thing. I'm constantly wanting power and control and to manipulate and to have someone fix me or be my soulmate or white knight. And that's just impossible.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, good. And so in the book, you talk about wanting to get to a point where you have multiple partners and fantasize about turning them into one single partner, right? And so one of my questions is, does that exist? Is that possible? Is the perfect partner out there?
No, that's not possible at all. I mean, that was the thing. I'd be like, oh, I love this about this person and this about this person. And I used to have this fantasy if I just mold them all together and make the most perfect guy. But if you think about it, how manipulative, how horrible to want to mash somebody with somebody else. Like, that is just such a horrible thing to say. And, you know, I got to a point where I'm like, okay, that's never going to happen. There is no perfect partner. There is no soulmate. No one is going to fix you. What really happens is you fix yourself and you become your own soulmate, because we're all humans. We're all flawed. You know, someone's going to disappoint you that you care about, and you have to be able to ride the roller coaster of that emotion and not become attached to them.
Yeah. And if it's an egregious thing that happens, you have to be willing to end the relationship, right? And sever.
Walk away.
Right.
I mean, that's the thing. My husband and I have been together for 16 years. We, you know, we have a deal. Like, if he leaves me, I will be okay.
Right.
I could not say that 11 and a half years ago, 12 years ago. Like, my worth was attached to who I was with. And if they didn't live up to my unrealistic expectations, I would then discard them or try to make them change them, and that's not fair.
Right. Okay. One last definition question.
Yes, please.
The difference between sex and love addiction and substance abuse or substance use disorder, substance addiction.
Well, substance addiction is a chemical addiction. So, you know, you get attached to the chemical, and sex and love addiction and sex addiction and love addiction are a progressive brain disease. So over time, it gets worse and worse, just like a chemical addiction.
Right.
But it gives off the same endorphins as heroin, as a drink. My drink is a person.
Right.
So I'm addicted to people. I use people to fill me. And a clear example is I had this one moment where I was calling friends because I was having a bad day. Friends. And we use every relationship, just not love partners. We use our parents, we use friends. We manipulate and try to have power and control over everybody in our lives. And my thing is, I used to say, if you just do what I say and what I want, then the world would be great. Like,
Right.
What an addict thing to do.
Right.
But yeah, it's the same release. It's the same endorphins. It's the same high. If you think back to the first moment you had the first kiss, you know, falling in love, that's a huge high. Those endorphins are released, just like cocaine releases them.
Right.
And people give me I've had people reach out and be like, no, it's so hard to get off heroin. It's so hard to get off alcohol. And I'm not saying it's not hard to get off. Any addiction is difficult.
Sure.
Anything that runs your life and keeps you from living in reality is difficult. But I always like to point out, a lot of places I've spoke at, rehab centers and places, the number one people lose their recovery and chemical addiction is because of relationships.
That's right.
I have had friends be murdered over this addiction. I've had friends commit suicide. I've had friends, I spoke in jail for 2.5 years. Every woman in that jail was in there for sex and love addiction. She sold something for her partner. She, you know, attempted murder, robbery for the partner. And this is a disease nobody talks about. Watch a Dateline. Every Dateline
100%.
is about a love triangle, or someone's unfaithful, or someone's wanting to live in a different reality than they're in.
Right.
And I think right now society doesn't understand that this is killing people. Relationships, unhealthy relationships, toxic relationships actually make a user use more. And I knew that. I had this moment, this heroin addict, recovering heroin addict came in and he said, I can quit heroin, but I can't quit her.
Yeah.
He's like, I cannot get out of this bad relationship.
It was a deeper addiction for him than the heroin itself.
Yeah.
And then, so in terms of the neurobiology, essentially that first kiss or that first experience with, you know, releasing the chemicals in the brain.
Masturbating,
Right.
looking at porn too young,
Right.
you know, desensitizing our brains of the sexuality and what sexuality is about, intimacy. And we have a hard time connecting sexuality and intimacy.
Yeah.
And that's usually the first addiction. It's either, you know, codependence with your parents. It's your first primary relationships are with people or not with drugs. So underneath the alcohol, the cigarettes, the drugs, it usually sits a sex and love addict.
Sure.
They say A is the last house on the block,
Yeah.
and sex and love addiction is the shack in the back that like no one wants to go to.
It's run down and
It's
totally
nobody, like you
dilapidated,
just
yeah.
like don't want to go
Right.
at all. It's
Well, and
torture.
And then once you get to the point where you cross that line into the addiction, as you discuss in the book, you spend a lot of time chasing that high, that first high.
I remember the first time I cheated, and I wrote about it in the book. You know, it was this moment where I was in a closet and my boyfriend's friend kisses me. And I kid you not, it was like heroin shot up my arm, and the power and control I felt over this person and the high, the rush it gave me was just like the best feeling in the world. And I've been chasing it ever since.
So from that moment, it was over.
It was over. It was sealed. Because behind it, you know, my parents didn't have a healthy relationship. I'd never wanted to get married. They did not model what a healthy marriage looked like.
Yeah.
They didn't know how to communicate properly, the fighting. They never slept in the same bed together. They never kissed. They never said, I love you. So I just didn't have a good model. And I turned to my sexuality and porn and masturbating when there was fights in the house. And that usually happens at a very, very early age.
Right. Wow. Okay. Well. So you've already alluded to some of the timeline around kind of how this all happened and when, but can you just kind of draw it out for us? So the time when you realized that you had a problem, that you're talking to Dr. Kath, right? And Dr. Kath suggests an SLAA meeting for you, right? And then you fight the system, but you go anyway. And then from that point, and you get to the point where you have achieved sobriety, you know, maybe like a year sobriety, and then you move into all the other experiences around your life in your healing process to now. What is that timeline? So
the healing process are looking back and seeing where it all started.
The whole thing. So when did it all start? What year was it?
I mean, when I go back, I have so many blind spots in my past, and a lot of addicts have this. They have had trauma or things happen where you block it out. But when I finally started breaking down those walls through therapy, twice a week for 8 years.
Expensive twice a week.
Very expensive. It wasn't covered by insurance, but it was like a soul massage for myself. It was self-care. It was an act. And I, of course, did not want to go and do the work and look at the inner child. But when I looked back, I realized there was a molestation that I didn't remember about. I realized with the relationship with my parents, not seeing them in a healthy marriage, you know, figuring out, I think it was age 3, that I, you know, started masturbating very early to self-soothe. And then when it really ramped up was in 2nd grade, boy crazy, you know, seeing that high that I could be in fantasy, watching movies way too young. I mean, my favorite movie growing up, and I talk about it in the book, is Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah.
And I remember watching that and seeing Michael White's butt and being like, wow, that's a nice butt. At 6, like who thinks that at 6 years old?
Most 6-year-olds are like, oh,
I want to see kissing. And then I remember at the end that these two people were so in love that one was willing to drink some poison and the other was willing to stab themselves. And I was like, that's it. That's what the ideal relationship. That's what true love means. Somebody has to be willing to die. I want you to be able to die, want to die for me.
Right.
Like, that's crazy. And then when I look at it now, I'm like, okay, wait a second. These kids, they were 14, right, in the story.
Yeah.
They knew each other for 2 days. Their families hated each other. There was already a murder between the families. Then they slept together after knowing each other less than 24 hours. Then they decided to run away together and instead acted like they were dying and then really killed themselves. Like, if somebody came up to me and told me that was their love life, I'd be like, get out. What are you doing?
Right. Tragedy or comedy?
Yeah, right. Oh, geez.
Shakespeare.
Yeah. But yeah, so I just had this warped sense. I wanted to live in the movies and fantasy and that was my world instead of living in reality. So then, you know, when I went through puberty and got my first like real boyfriend and lost my virginity pretty young. I mean, 13 is a very young age.
Young.
I see 13-year-olds now and I'm like, what? How did I do that? Why did I do that? You know, and then just the breaking up of my parents' marriage, it just amplified. Everything got amplified and I just kept getting worse and worse and worse.
Okay. So when you got to that point and you're sitting in Dr. Kath's office and she's like, you need to go to SLAA. What year was it?
That was almost 12 years ago.
Okay.
So I don't know the year. What's
So it's gonna be like,
It was December 6th, 2008 or 2009.
okay.
Yeah. D-Day.
All right, and then and then a year later, so that book, your book, takes place in about a year.
Yeah,
right?
a year.
Okay, so it's a snapshot of that year of your recovery time, and it was tumultuous.
It was torture.
Yeah.
It was pure torture. I mean, the first 9 months was the most brutal pain you can imagine. I cried every day for those 9 months. I crawled on the floor. I got sick. I withered in pain. I lost tons of weight. I mean, I just was a shell of a person. And what was happening was that addict self was dying. And I had to get rid of all my guy friends. I had to set bottom lines. We call them bottom lines, where that's what, what our sobriety is based on. Everybody's bottom lines are completely different. So if you were in the program, you would have different ones than I do. That's why it makes it so hard with the addiction. It's not black and white like drugs and alcohol. You can't get rid of people forever. But what you do is you take away all the behaviors, all the people. So all the guys, completely no guy friends. I wouldn't talk, text, or email any men whatsoever. I didn't work for an actress for the first year of recovery because I couldn't walk into the room and give a part of myself when I didn't even actually have myself.
Yeah.
And what that looked like, how I'd go to a restaurant, I'd sit and I would look down and I would order my food.
You wouldn't even look at your server.
Nope.
Because if it happened to be a man, then.
Yeah. Because I always had that personality, that flirtatious personality, giving off that energy. I say it's a raping of other people's energy. That's how I describe it, that I would go into the world and rape you of your energy and say, fill me, give me attention, make me feel worthy. And then I go to the next person and do the same thing. And I could not cut off that energy. So I had to take drastic measures. I did not look at men for 2.5 years. It was brutal. I mean, I can't tell. There was one moment I was sitting on my bed and the pain that was coming out of me was like a snake. And my throat was closing up because whenever I have like trauma stuff, my throat closes up. People get it in the chest and mine through. And I had my mouth open and tears just coming like, and I couldn't speak. And I looked at the clock and 45 minutes passed. And it was like an exorcism of self was coming out. It was intense.
That's pretty intense.
Yeah.
And you were just by yourself.
No, I actually was living with my boyfriend at the time. And we were living together and, we had very strict rules. He wasn't allowed to fix it. He wasn't allowed to comfort me. He wasn't allowed to ask me if I was okay. He had to leave me alone, and we really just had to have very clear boundaries of what could be asked.
Okay.
I had to go through it alone.
You did?
Yeah.
This brings me to the dating list.
Oh, yeah.
This intense list of, I don't know how many things, definitely double-digit amount of things that you can not do.
Yeah.
When you're getting back in the dating game after
Yes.
Your period of recovery, initial recovery. So how do you go on a date and do all these things and keep all these things in your mind of what you can't be doing, and then when something comes up, how do you move away from it? Do you date people in the program that kind of understand, or how does that work?
No, there's not any. You're not supposed to 13-step in the program. It's the beautiful thing about the community is it's very, very boundary. If somebody asks me, isn't it strange? Like, don't you feel like you're nervous going into a sex and love addicts room or with all these men and women that are sex addicts? And I was like, no, it's the safest place in the world.
Yeah.
Like, everybody is so respectful. You have to dress a certain way. You can't say certain things. It's a very, very tight community, and they are no joke. They will tell you, like, to your face, like, that is not okay. So the dating doesn't happen till later. I mean, it's really set by your sponsor. We work the program just like 12 steps in AA. I actually worked my program through AA. I did it through Herb K's program. the big book, but to get to the dating, you have to do your 4-step. You have to look at all those resentments. Mine was 176 people on my resentment list. I was a carrier of a lot of resentment.
Yeah.
Then looking at my side, then looking at my character defects. And once you get past the character defects and going into making amends to people, then you get to date. Because how are you going to date and have new relationships when you don't know the patterns of your old relationships?
Right, and you haven't healed any of that in yourself either.
No, you're just going to repeat the same pattern over and over again. And that was, for me looking at it, going through those 176 people, when I think I got to 102 or 6, I threw the book against the wall. And I'm like, I'm just repeating myself. Why?
Right.
And she's like, get it together. That's the point. You've lived this over and over and over again. So the dating is very, very strict. It's like 1 date a week, can't hold hands till date 3, can't have a conversation, can't trauma bond, can't, phone calls have to be like 5 minutes. Everybody's is different though.
Yeah. Well, then how though? So you meet a guy and you're ready to start dating.
Right.
Your sponsor agrees, and then you meet someone, and then you're just like, well, so I have this thing. I mean, I don't know. How do you do it?
No, you don't say that.
Okay.
No.
What do you do?
Well, the first thing is, you're interviewing them.
Yeah.
You look at a date as an interview. You look at a date not to get high. So if you get that fireworks feeling with someone, that's a
red flag.
Red flag.
Got it.
Anybody with that endorphin release.
Which is another huge list on the next page is your red flags list.
Flags,
Go on.
Yeah. Yeah, so the first thing is, you have to like the person as a friend. I mean, listen, think about how many friends you have or people, they are dating someone they don't even like as a friend.
Yeah.
So you look at a date as an interview. Do I want to spend time with this person? Do I like this person? Am I going to like this person in a year?
Right.
So it's very simple. You don't try to put all that pressure on yourself to find the one. And you're not looking for the one because you're working on yourself.
Right.
But those boundaries have to be set up because we will, as a community, and I'll speak for myself, but we get attached too quickly. We reveal too much. We trauma bond. We go into that like, oh, me too, or gossiping, or, all that stuff that is fake intimacy. So you have to go really slow. It's like baby steps. Like you don't kiss until the 5th date. You don't sleep together. You have to get tested first. Then you don't sleep together till the 8th date after you have the conversation if you guys are exclusive.
So you're running all these rules in the background while this unsuspecting person is just sitting across from you on a date.
Yeah. I mean, some people are even married and dating for a long time and their partner doesn't even know they're in the program.
Right.
People don't talk about it. People don't want to say they're sex and love addicts. It's like I said, it's a lot of stigma and a lot of shame, especially for women. Men don't want to say they're love addicts, but a lot of them are. Yeah. They're looking for that partner to complete them.
Speaking of the 12 steps.
Yes.
You structured the book around 10 rules, right? And I thought it was a really intuitive way to write a book because you have a structure and you can kind of like place your story within each of these rules. And as a reader, it was I'm kind of an organized thinker, right? And so it was really convenient for me to be like, okay, so this is in the this isn't within the first rule, or this is, you're going to die alone. So whatever that rule is, right?
Rule 10.
Rule number 10, right? And so things fit into those rules. And it was a really brilliant way to put the book together. But I couldn't find those rules anywhere. Where did they come from?
Me.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you made them up.
I did.
So say more about that.
Yeah, I made up these rules. I was thinking, I have it based on the 12 steps, my life. But I wanted to make it accessible to people that don't want to be in 12-step programs. There's a lot of people that are scared of 12-step programs and they don't work for some people. The therapy route or the group settings, or everybody has their different way. So I wanted to make the book where you get these 10 rules that are easy. They're not the 12 steps. And you can understand looking at the why, walking through the fire and letting that shit burn.
Right.
Like, I wanted to give a visual where a normie or someone that wasn't an addict could go, oh, I could do some of that. Or my relationships aren't that healthy in this area. Or, oh, I compare and despair, you know,
Yeah.
all those things, we all do them. So I wanted to write it where it was educational but entertaining.
Right.
But you know, because all the books about sex and love addiction that I've read are so clinical, are so academic. I would read one page and I'd throw it against the wall and like couldn't retain the information. And I wanted to, you know, to entertain people, but come up with these rules that can help people actually live their life. So it's kind of like a self-help memoir /
Right.
chick lit entertaining book. But yeah, those are my rules. I live by those rules.
But it's evident that that's how you did it, right? That's how you got through the process. And it's kind of like, I think Russell Brand does something similar with the 12 steps. Yeah, he has inserted profanity into some of the steps, right? To just kind of like snap people out of the clinical nature of
the 12 steps,
of the steps, right? And kind of how they're worded. It's actually quite good. And some people subscribe to it, even people on my staff here.
Well, yeah, because when you're an addict, first of all, we don't like rules. Like, we hate rules.
Right.
Like, I'm a rule breaker.
You're gonna put me in a box?
That
right?
I'm gonna jump over the box.
Yeah.
You know? So especially with the 12 steps, it's just like, ugh, a power greater than myself. Like, what is that? No one's taking care of me. I'm taking care of me. So it's like, no, come up with your own form of power greater than yourselves, or God, or whatever. And some of them, even, you know, looking back at the why, I mean, that's kind of the 4th step. So I just organized it in a way where it wasn't beaten down someone's throat.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe that's your next book.
Well, I already written the 2nd book.
Have you?
Yeah, the follow-up.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, okay. So then back to dating.
Right, dating.
I'm interested in the relationship and how it started with your husband. If you want to share.
I do. I mean, that's the thing. So as I created the book, it was pure memoir when I wrote it.
Yeah.
The first 45 days I wrote it. But when I started editing the book and working on it and rewriting that, it's exhausting. All these other memories started popping up. All these things that other fellows went through, my sponsees, my sponsors, people that I've known my whole life. And I just started putting it all in the book. And then dreams started happening. So I wanted, you know, to follow Roxanne through that 1 year. So Roxanne's not me. Is me, but then she's not me. Roxanne could be you, could be anybody has some Roxanne in them. People use people a lot. So that's what I said.
Okay,
so,
wait, I'm going to stop you right there because in starting the book, you do a really good job at making everybody in the book anonymous, right? You do a really good job there, and we're never going to know who these people are, and that's great. And then you do it with Roxanne, which we clearly know is you as a reader, you know, reading this book. So that's my question is, you're kind of saying it now, but why? Why not just use your name since these are your stories?
Because some of them are not my stories. Some of them are other people's stories.
Okay.
So
I didn't know that.
Yes.
All right.
So I didn't make it a memoir because I wanted to be able to do where it could be a bunch of different stories and my story. So you'll never know which one is my stories, and you'll never know which one is somebody else's stories.
Gotcha.
And I just wanted to make a well-rounded sex and love addict where anybody could be like, oh fuck, I did that, or oh, I have done that. You know what I mean? Like, so I just wanted to make it where anybody can, like, for her, she has never had a one-night stand. I haven't had a one-night stand. And then as you go into chapter 8, you know, something happens. So I just wanted to put other people's experiences in it. When I first got sober, the boy I was living with is my husband today.
Okay.
So we have been together for 16 years. I didn't go through the program and meet the most perfect partner that completes me, like I said.
Right.
I met myself. And like I said, if he leaves me today, I'll be okay.
Right.
So I did not go through the dating, but I've taken a number of people through dating in the program. Yeah.
So you got yourself to a point where you are your own soulmate.
Yeah.
Right. And then that point opens you up to enter a healthy relationship.
Yeah. It is. I mean, to know how to communicate, to understand a person, to not take things personal, to always talk from a place of like, not accusatory and things like that. So that's what I've learned.
Well, and a lot of teaching, I presume, too.
Yeah.
And teaching your partner how to
treat you.
To treat you.
Yeah, to have boundaries.
That's right.
You know, you can't talk to me a certain way, or that is what you come up with. You come up with your boundaries so you can walk into the world and have boundaries. I used to think it would be the most boring existence. And I'm sure if someone's listening, they're being like, oh, I don't want to give up flirting. I don't want to give up dating a bunch of people. I don't want to give up intrigue. I don't want to give up masturbation. I don't want to give up porn. I don't want to give up social media, all that stuff people don't want to give up. They think their life's going to be boring, but I have to tell you, to not be run by those things is the most freeing, because I'm taking care of myself for the first time.
So if somebody is watching or listening to this right now, what would you say to them? And they're wondering, or maybe suspecting that they are a sex and love addict.
Okay.
What would you say to them right now? What's the first step of reaching out for help?
Well, first of all, if there's drama in your life with relationships, that's usually the first sign. There's no drama in my life. Every friend I have shows up for me. I have good relationships with my family, which took a while.
Yeah.
You know, I have no drama with my husband. I don't have drama with my son. I don't use my son to fill me or fix mom, or use him to like give me my worth. So all those things, if there's drama in your life, that's the first sign. The second thing I always tell people is go fill out the 40 self-diagnosed questionnaire online. So you type in 40 self-diagnosed Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous questionnaire and take the quiz. You know, I took the quiz in the book. That's my real number. You have to read chapter 3 to find out that number,
right.
But it's a high number. And if you get more than 5 yeses, they say you might have a problem in this area. And it's questions like, do you look for someone to fix you? Have you lost count of the sexual partners you've had? Have you had inappropriate sex with inappropriate people at inappropriate times? Are you always fantasizing about the perfect relationship? It's questions like that. They're very simple. Go fill it out. And if you get more than 5 yeses, and then talk to somebody.
Sure.
Somebody you trust.
Okay.
You know, say, hey, I feel like my relationship is bad. Like I keep going back to this person that keeps treating me horrible, or I keep going on dates and then, you know, ghosting somebody, and I keep doing it again. I'm always swiping left and right looking for that next person to complete me. I mean, it's really just talk to somebody and say, I think I might have a problem. I don't know how to have a healthy relationship.
And then maybe follow a link to a potential meeting in your area.
Yeah, I mean, we have meetings all over the world now. My sponsee was in Bali, and she went to a meeting in Bali. I mean, the biggest community is Los Angeles. We have about 10 to 15 meetings a day. No, 10 to 15 meetings a day.
Yeah.
They're all range of meetings, men, mixed meetings. I love mixed meetings because you get to see the humility in the opposite sex. So I love, you know, listening to a man and seeing, oh, he has trauma too. So it makes a person a whole person instead of an object.
Gotcha.
You know, they focus on sexual anorexia, our body images, and social media. So we have meetings for everything. And then New York's the second biggest community, and then London, and then Sydney, Australia. But they're all over. You can go online now and jump on a meeting right now.
Great.
It's a big community. It used to be small. I mean, the first meeting I went to was 30 people, all walks of life, every ethnicity, as you know, in any recovery situation,
Yeah.
It's like, doesn't matter who you are. It's like an A-list celebrity, a janitor, a social worker, an elementary school teacher, a CEO. Like, it doesn't matter. And they were all saying something that I was like, oh, I've said that, done that, thought about doing that, you know, and you're not alone. And that's
Right.
the thing. You are not alone. There are so many people in this world that don't know how to give up porn, do not know how to give up masturbation, do not know how to get out of that bad relationship that is tormenting them.
So is it still a shack in the back, or is it now a cottage?
No, I think it's always, I'm hoping one day it won't be the shack in the back. I'm hoping people walk in and know that it's a safe place. It's a place to find yourself, because it really isn't about sex and love.
Right.
That's the thing. People think it's like, oh, a bunch of nymphomaniacs running around trying to have sex. It's not about that. It's literally about finding your self-love. It's the core of your existence. And that's why I hope one day that stigma and shame will be lifted and we won't be the shack in the back. But it's a big shack right now. It's getting huge. I mean, the other day we had a 20-year-old coming in saying like, I'm struggling, with watching too much porn and not being able to connect. And it's getting worse and worse. I think it's an epidemic is coming, honestly.
Absolutely. It feels like that, especially with the amount of access that people have to everybody else's life, including all the porn, all the social media, all the kind of windows into people's lives. It's really hard to be healthy, I think, these days.
Yeah, I can't imagine being a 19-year-old growing up with that. I think I would be dead, honestly.
Wow.
We used to go into this world and just compare ourselves to our small communities or the people in high school and go home and then be out of that. But now people are picking up their phones and creating these fake lives.
Yeah. There's
and
never getting out.
Yeah.
You don't get out. You're just
so much disconnection. And then over-sexualizing so young is just these young kids are coming in, and I'm trying to help.
Yeah. Okay. In almost every chapter in the book, you go into what I'm calling script mode, and you change the text, the font, and the mode of writing, the style of writing into like reading a screenplay, right?
Correct.
And this is what's happening, and these visualizations or fantasies, and sometimes I think are actually real things that happened to you in the past. What was the motivation behind going into script mode in your story there?
Well, because I think as an actress, I always go into script mode. In my
think
head.
like that?
I do think like that.
Okay.
I think being in the business for so long, I'll see somebody and I'll see them doing something, and the thoughts like how you would write it and how it would be shot and like the zoom of the camera.
Right.
And I was like, that'd be so my editor actually said, that would be so fascinating if you put this section in script form so that other people can see what an actor looks at.
Right.
And I was like, oh my God, that's a genius idea. So
Yeah.
I did one of them and I was like, oh, I love it. It's like every time she goes into fantasy, she goes into the actor world.
Right. And so she's living out these things in her head. There was one about a bully where Roxanne hits the bully in the face, and I'm thinking like, I think this one's actually real, but I don't know, is it?
That one was actually real. I will say the truth. Yeah, that one was real.
So we do know which one.
You do know.
Okay.
I mean, I will say, and I'm very transparent, when you go into the past, when Roxanne goes into the past, 85% of those stories are real.
Yeah.
That is my background. That is the situations I have been in with my family. The character defects are all my character defects. So all that background stuff, a lot of it is real.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. And then so I'm always curious about the parents. It's the therapist in me, right? So
Okay.
Have the parents read the book? And I'm sure they have. What do they think?
Oh, I love this question. So my mom read the book, and as you have read it, it's pretty graphic.
Oh, yeah.
It goes there. It goes really deep and dark and sexual. So when she called me a day and a half later after the book was released and I sent it to her, she was crying on FaceTime. And I was like, oh no. Uh-oh. Because I've put some things in there that she's not proud of. But as parents, we are flawed. I'm a parent now, and I understand. I try the best I can. It's the hardest job in the world. But she called crying, and she was so sweet. She said, for the first time in a decade, I actually understand your disease. And it was such a beautiful moment that her and I got, like that she really saw me, that it wasn't just some thing that my daughter's in, or she just got it. And then she said, and I've done some of the things you've done.
Huh.
And it was like, as a child, sometimes you just want to be seen by your parents.
Yeah.
You just want your parent to say, I'm sorry that I didn't know how to be a mom because I didn't have a great mom. And this last any resentment that I didn't even know I was holding just lifted. It was just a beautiful moment we had together.
Wow. So it took this remarkable act of transparency on your part to get that moment of validation.
Yeah, and I wasn't even expecting it. And I was staring at the phone, and I was like blank, and my husband was next to me, and he was already crying, and she was crying. And I got off the FaceTime, and I looked at him, and I go, and I just like, like little kid, just like
snot,
snot, just everywhere. Like, I can't believe that. Like, it was just such like, I wasn't prepared for that. And that was, I said, and my husband, and he said, if that is the only thing that comes of this book, wasn't it worth it? And I said, completely.
Absolutely. That seems like a really important part of your recovery.
Yeah. And a lot of friends are in recovery now in other programs. A lot of people have read the book and like joined Overeaters Anonymous and joined Debtors Anonymous and Shopping Anonymous and alcohol. I've interviewed one woman that read the book and she realized she has an alcohol problem. So it's just like, it's just opening up the doors for us to be like, hey, we do these things and it's okay. We're in this together.
Yeah.
You are not alone.
And Dad, he hasn't read it?
He did read it.
Oh, different story there?
It's a little bit of a different story. What happened is his brother read it first.
Okay.
And he reached out to me and he was like, I am so proud of you. And it just was this beautiful moment with my uncle. And he said, I don't know if you should read her book. It's pretty graphic. And my dad doesn't like to be told what to do. So he read my book and he got halfway through and he called me and he was like, wait, that didn't happen. And he started saying certain things didn't happen. And I said, yes, it did. Yes, it did. So, you know, sometimes as parents, they do the best they can. And I think the book brought to light some of the past that he tried to forget.
Yeah.
And so we had a bit of a moment where I'm like, I'm sorry, it's out there. It's to help people, you know, and you don't have to read it. And then he finished reading it and he called me 2 days later and he was like, I'm so proud of you. It's really well written. It's, you know, he gave me the best he could.
Sure.
And that's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, I mean, as parents, and you're finding this out, we do the best we can with what we have at the time. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
And, I could see how that would be really hard for a parent to read. I mean, that's super brave on your part. If I were to tell or write down the story of my measly past, you know, and just be like, I would probably wait for my parents to pass. Sorry, Mom. But like, you know, and then you have the siblings to contend with. Like, what are you talking about? Like,
yeah, I didn't put my sister in the book.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's that was a really brave thing to do.
Thank you.
I think that
it was important though, you know, because even like parents doing their best, I love talking about, you know, the dyslexia and how my mother handled it and the affair and how disconnected they were and seeing my father lie, you know. So those things is what made me an addict. And how can I deny those? And I'm not saying they're bad people.
Right.
But yeah, it was a little, there was moments where I was like, I don't know if I should do this.
Well, okay, so then that like publishing it, but what about your fingers hovering over the keyboard in
Oh
the
no,
moment?
that just came out.
That just came out.
Yeah.
There was never like I don't know if I should put that in there.
No, I put everything in there.
Okay, well yeah, you definitely.
I put everything in there. I did not leave anything out, and I put, you know, other people and other things, but I put everything in there. And I think writing it as a fiction, as a Roma Clef fiction, gave me that license to just put it all out there. And I can say, you don't know which is mine and which is somebody else's.
That's true.
Yeah.
Okay, well done.
Thank you.
Gives you the carte blanche to just, you know, go all in. Okay.
Yeah.
So in some of these discussions that, you know, I'm just going to assume, Roxanne, you know, is a lot of your story in there. And you're talking to Dr. Kath, and you're in the beginning of all of it. And you're talking about digging through all of the shit to uncover the gold.
Dig through the shit to get to the gold.
And then you say that, what is the gold? Yeah. So you say that your innocence was the gold.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? What does that mean?
Well, when Dr. Kath and I worked together, we did a lot of inner child work, which I feel is really important, especially as an addict. To go back to that trauma, what your little child felt like. And she taught me that with the trauma I was doing to myself and other people were doing to me, and then all the addiction stuff on top of it, that I was burying my innocence with shit, pretty much. Right. And she said, every time you cry, You have to imagine yourself digging through your shit to get to your gold, because that's where your real self lies. That's where your innocence lies. That's where you want to get back to. That was taken from you.
Right. And then when you saw that and you found that, liberating. Was it liberating?
Yeah. It was probably the best feeling in the world, because for the first time in my life, I felt whole. I felt like I wasn't broken. I felt like I wasn't alone, and that I wasn't a bad person. I just did bad things.
Yeah.
And that didn't define me anymore.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fascinating to me. Okay, then you also say in there that which certain phrases that you mention really catch my eye.
Okay.
I guess I don't know if it's catching my eye or just catching something within, right? My gut, more like. And you say you were addicted to feeling your self-esteem plummet.
Mm-hmm.
And how did you even put that together, right? How did you find that out about yourself? And to say it in such a complete, like, punch in the face kind of statement, what does it mean?
Well, I was my own worst enemy. I did everything in my power to destroy myself. And that's when I really looked at that Compare and Despair, chapter 9, why I did the things I did, because underneath I felt so worthless. Exterior, I looked like I had my life together, but underneath I was just screaming because I felt so worthless underneath. And when I started doing that work and doing the therapy and all that, I just realized, like, I was addicted to that negative fantasy just as much as the high fantasy.
So you willingly put yourself in situations that would have
lose.
negative outcomes,
Yeah.
and you would lose because that's what you felt you deserved.
Yeah, and that's what I was comfortable in. Living in the chaos, living in that negative thoughts, it kept my addict acting out. And
Right.
I would already think, well, I already feel like crap, so I might as well do it. It will make me feel better for a second. And then, so you get addicted to that negativity. When things are great, sometimes I'm like, is the other shoe going to drop? Because I'm used to the other shoe dropping.
Right.
So instead, I just put myself in situations where the shoe was going to drop, or I wasn't ever going to measure up.
Was it more predictable that way?
Yeah, because then I wouldn't be caught off guard.
Right.
And it would catch me off guard if I did something to someone and they still show up for me and I'm like, wait, what is this? And then I'd be like, no, that's too much. No, that's too much intimacy. True intimacy is very painful for me. I don't know if you experience that as an addict, but when I'm really connected to a person, it's almost painful.
Huh.
And sometimes it's too much. Like, I love too much. We are very sensitive people.
Yeah.
And I feel like that sensitivity, then I went the opposite direction and wanted to self-sabotage.
Okay.
Yeah.
During Rule 4
Rule 4.
section, to heal and move forward, look back at the why. You discuss your resentments and how they have little to do with the other person. Say more about that.
Oh, gosh. I mean, if you look at any of your resentments, you have unrealistic expectations on someone, right?
Yeah.
I mean, then you...
For sure, especially in a relationship that's
right?
romantic. Yeah.
Or any relationship, really. You just have unrealistic expectations. So you're going to be disappointed. And then a resentment forms. And then you get to be like the holder of that resentment and get to like be righteous.
Right.
And like, I would always be like, I want to like make sure they're tortured as much as I'm tortured.
Right.
So it was that constant battle of trying not to hold resentments, but then I would have resentments and then I wouldn't ever look at them. And then I just kept acting them out over and over again and carrying them on to the next person. Hurt people. And that's what a lot of addicts do, especially sex and love addicts. We got hurt somehow and we just want to make everyone else miserable around us.
Right.
So we're not alone.
So then it's all about you and how you interact with the world.
Yeah.
Really doesn't, I mean, you can say all you want about that person did this to me, that person did that to me, but really it's about your interaction with that person and how you influence that.
Exactly.
Right.
So now I have no expectations on anyone. You know,
Right.
I just keep my side of the street clean. And the moment that I feel a resentment coming, I look at my expectation. Did I expect something they weren't able to give? Am I always going to somebody that's impossible for them to show up for me? How many times have you done that? Gone to somebody and you're going to someone and they're an empty well, and it's like, then you get a resentment. And so I don't have the luxury of justifiable anger anymore.
Sure. You even get resentments towards people who have healthy boundaries.
Oh,
when you're in a sickness, right? And you're trying to.
Oh, those are my favorite.
Right.
Because then I'm like, you don't know what you're doing. Like,
right.
Like all self-righteous and egotistical. And it's just, we die in that state. And I was just a walking zombie of resentment. It's a miserable place to be in.
Well, it was really well put in that chapter. Rule number 4, people. Okay. Adult up. Admit your mistakes. You lay out your character defects. We talked about that a little bit, but this might be a small repeat, but what was it like for you listing your character defects?
Chapter 5, 6, and 7 were the worst. The absolute worst to write, worst to rewrite. I hated chapter 5, 6, and 7. I actually wanted to take them out of the book.
Oh.
There's a part of me that every time I got to them, I was like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. Because it was reliving. It's hard to relook at your character defects over and over again and look at the things you did in the past.
Yeah.
So listing those down, I mean, when I first did my character defects list, it was like 50. And then she had made me take it down to a much smaller, manageable number. And then every day I'd have to look at the character defect. I couldn't be jealous that day or envious. I couldn't be impatient. And I'd focus on that one character defect, because when we're in our character defects, we're at our worst.
Yeah.
So writing adulting up, and I never wanted to adult up. A lot of sex and love addicts don't want to adult up, because then you have to take responsibility. You have to communicate and say, you can't talk to me like that. You can't treat me like that.
And set boundaries.
Set boundaries, and setting boundaries is not fun. There's no passion or high setting boundaries with someone.
Yeah, it's so boring.
Right?
Yeah. And sometimes it's hard. It's always hard to set a boundary, especially in areas that you're insecure about.
Yeah.
Right? But
especially when you don't know your boundaries. A
That's
lot of
true, too.
addicts and a lot of sex and love addicts don't know their boundaries. They don't know what they want. So you're like an infant walking into the world going, I don't know what I want to be loved, but I don't know how to love or be loved.
right. Is this love? Are
Is
you my
this
mother?
love? Yeah,
Right? The
this
child's
is,
book.
but it's true. Are
Yeah.
you my mother? It's the same thing. You're like going around trying to look for this paternal love or someone that you didn't get from a young age. And it's exhausting to be in. And then you keep repeating those same relationships over and over again. You wonder why, because you're stuck in your character defects and patterns.
That's right.
And I hate adulting up. Who wants to adult up?
I know. It's so boring.
It is so boring. I don't want to adult up.
But for our audience, it is rewarding, and that's how
It
you
is.
come out of this, right?
Yes.
They're
Well-
like, wait a minute, they just told us we don't need to adult up.
But you need to, because you cannot be a child anymore. You cannot. I see my toddler sometimes, and he'll just throw a tantrum. And a part of me looks at him like, that's what my addict wants to do.
Right.
My addict's not getting its way. It wants to throw a tantrum. It wants to sit in the corner and sulk, manipulate, try to maneuver, bargain.
Yeah.
That's my addict. And we're not allowed to act like that. You're a person in the world. You're a worker among workers. You cannot go in this world expecting everybody to do everything for you. It's time to adult up.
Yeah. Okay. A little bit more about compare and despair.
Oof,
All right,
the worst.
I know it's really hard. And look, I mean, before I get to the question, I see all of these rules and, the steps kind of on a spectrum, right? I feel like everybody's got, especially with sex and love addiction, everybody's got an element of it to some degree,
Yes.
right? Where you are on the spectrum is where you are on the spectrum. So, when you cross a certain line on that and you get into kind of that unhealthy and maybe pathological area, you really need help. But then, there are a lot of other people who are functioning across that spectrum in the less pathological areas, and they're just living their lives and doing okay. So compare and despair, we all do it,
Yeah.
right? And so at what point does it become pathological?
Well, I think when you look at it, and for instance, in the book, there's this moment I was having a great day, and I look online, and my world crashes because I'm looking at someone else's outsides and comparing them to my insides. And we always think if we have that, if we get that car, if we get that job, if I get that part as an actress, if I get that money in the bank, I'm going to be happy.
External motivators, right?
Yeah, it doesn't work that way. I mean, I know a bunch of A-list celebrities that are struggling right now. They made $1 million an episode and they're absolutely miserable.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way. And so I still do it. It's still something I struggle with every day. I compare my insides to other people's outsides, and it's just the worst place to be in the world because you're not in gratitude, you're not in the present, and you're taking for granted the things that you do have. So that's the hardest one for me. I think that's my number one. That's why I made it a whole chapter.
Right.
I still struggle with, yeah.
Okay, so on that, you say that you realize, and I'm going to put this in quotes, I realize that what I put out into the world should be my true reality, right? And in saying that, when you realize that, was that part of the motivation to write this book?
Probably.
It seems like it would be really associated with the follow through.
Yeah,
right?
I think I've lived my whole life with a mask on, and I talk about that Dr. Kath told me that, she said I wear the mask of a high-class prostitute that she worked with, and it was like a slap in the face.
Yeah.
It was like a cold bucket. And I was like, what are you talking about? I don't wear a mask. And it was like a mask on top of a mask on top of a mask. And the day that I started speaking my truth, only good things have happened. So I live my life now trying to be as truthful as possible. Not oversharing, having my own private stuff, but really just putting it all out there and say, listen, I struggle with this too. I'm not perfect. I have insecurities just like everyone else. Because before I masked them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. All right, well, we're going to wind it down.
Okay.
All right, so, well, this one's important. So, tell me about sponsoring and how that has impacted your life.
Wow. Sponsoring probably, and being a sponsee, so let's do both, right? So it establishes boundaries. So what happens in the meetings is you have a sponsor, someone to take you through the steps that you want what they have. And that establishes a boundary between you guys. You can't do certain things. You can't say certain things. You have to treat the sponsor a certain way. So it's the first healthy relationship that you have in the program. And then you have the fellows and other people, and you establish those relationships. And then after you get on the other side of your withdrawal, the step work, after the step 12, you usually start sponsoring. And it's pretty much the best thing I've ever done, to be of service to somebody and want nothing in return.
Yeah.
It's actually just an act of service. And I've always wanted something from somebody.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people go through this world wanting stuff from people. And this is something that I do. I show up for another person to be of service, and they keep me sober. And here's the thing, it's really hard to sponsor in Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous. The turnover rate in our program is through the roof.
Yeah.
I think it's 5% stay.
Oof.
I mean, yeah, it's brutal.
That's
Not a lot of
low.
people stay.
Yeah.
I'm an old timer with 11 and a half years. I mean, I think just a handful of people are still in the program, and it's a revolving door. They literally just come in and come out.
Yeah.
And to be able to even help someone for a short period of time, it helps me stay grounded, helps me stay present, helps me stay sober. I show up, I keep my word. If I'm wrong, I promptly admitted it. So I work those steps with a sponsee just when they're working them also.
Sure.
And it also flashes me back to when I began.
You
And
see
I'm
a
like,
lot of yourself in other people.
oh my God, so much stuff. And it's like, I don't want to go back to that.
Yeah, well,
It's a constant reminder, I don't want to go back to that pain, that unbearable pain, but to sit in front of somebody that keeps blowing up their life and going back to their qualifier, which qualifiers are like the heroin,
right.
like the alcohol. So we call the person you're addicted to the qualifier, the one that brought you into the program, brought you to your knees. And to see someone, my oldest sponsee who's been with me, I think 7.5 years now. She hasn't even finished her step 12. So it takes a really long time. It took me 9 years to finish my 12 steps.
Wow.
It took me a really, really long time.
And
it takes what it takes.
Right. You have to get through it.
Yeah.
Because this is your life, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I have an unrelated question for you. That
Yay.
is, let's see, where's it? I have a note in my copy of your book that says, "Did you cave?" And I don't know, so now knowing what I know about the story and how Roxanne is a multitude of people and their stories, I'm assuming this one is you, where you don't believe in you don't believe in participation trophies. And now that you have a child, you explicitly say in there, I want you to ask me this in a number of years and ask me my opinion on it. Now you have a 3-year-old kid. What do you think about that?
I still don't believe in participation trophies.
Okay.
I know, it's horrible. I just feel like we have to be able to lose graciously. And I think it doesn't teach a child to lose graciously. That there can't be a winner, all winners all the time.
Right.
That's unrealistic expectations and can garner entitlement. And I definitely, through my childhood, when, you know, it wasn't like stated, I got really entitled. So I don't know, but my kid's not playing sports yet. So just wait for that.
It's going to be in there. Your kid's going to have this crazy game in the final championship, and they're going to work really hard, and they're going to lose. And then, no, I don't know.
Probably, and I'll be like, get him a trophy, give him a trophy.
Just take him for ice cream. It's all good. You're right. It's not how life works.
It's not how, and I just want to teach my child how to be okay in life at life's terms, because I felt like I did not have that. And the reason I am staying sober, and my husband is, we both stay sober, is that we don't want to carry on the addiction to our child. We want to show healthy boundaries. We want to say, you know, no, you can't treat me like that. I know you're 3 years old, but you're not allowed to talk to me like that.
Right. It's breaking the cycle.
It is. We're breaking the cycle. And if I can do just that, if I can break the cycle where he's not in a room, you know, he's not saying my mom and dad messed me up, then I will be like, thank you. I'm sure I'll mess him up somehow, but
we all do. Right?
I know.
And what are you going to do? We do the best we can with what we have at the time.
Yeah.
Right? So.
And I think being a parent really taught me, you know, how to set boundaries, but also how to, you know, he's his own person. And I feel like a lot of parents are like, you're my child, I made you. And it's like, no, he has his own God. He is his own person. He will be taken care of. It's been a big lesson for me.
Yeah, and we learn so much through our children.
Yeah.
And there's developmental theory out there that, you know, having children is part of our, you know, brain development. And I firmly believe that that's true, because there are things you know now that you would never have known otherwise. Being an aunt, or, you know, being a friend.
Nothing.
Or,
it's the hardest job in the world.
Yeah, it really is. And carries the most responsibility with it.
Yeah.
So, Brianne, when can we expect your next book?
So I'm finished book 2. I'm in rewrites right now. We get to then have book 3 and book 4. So hopefully next year. I mean, I'm working on it now in between everything. But I just really want to help people understand this disease and be of service to other people outside of my community, because I feel like society really amplifies fantasy and unrealistic expectations of love and how it's supposed to complete you. And, you know, if this book is all it is, then that's it, you know. But I've already written it, so hopefully it goes through and everything, you know, helps. There's another 10 rules. It goes to rule 11 through 20.
Well, that's great. What a tremendous gift to the sex and love addiction community, and to us in the recovery community, and to anybody out there who's struggling. I think you're doing a really amazing thing, and we're really happy to have you here today.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been such an honor. I could talk to you forever.